It started like any other quiet Saturday, the kind that hums with the sound of distant lawnmowers and a clock that seems to tick louder when you're alone. I was sitting cross-legged on the living room rug, surrounded by piles of old medical papers. The air smelled faintly of lemon cleaner and dust. Michael had gone out to run errands, and I figured I'd finally organize the files he'd been nagging me about for months. Just a normal afternoon, until I opened that thick folder with his name on it. I flipped through test results, old prescriptions, and insurance forms without much thought. But then I saw it. A hospital form from 2 years ago. My eyes landed on a line that made my stomach twist. Emergency contact, spouse, Rachel Moore. I stared at it, blinked, and stared again, hoping I'd read it wrong. The letters didn't move. They sat there, dark and deliberate, spelling out a truth I hadn't been meant to see. I whispered the name out loud, like saying it might make sense of it. Rachel Moore? That's not me. The room suddenly felt colder. I checked the date again, the same week he said he was away on a business trip. I remembered the phone calls from that hotel, his tired voice, the fake exhaustion. My heart started pounding, sharp and loud in my ears. That was the moment everything began to shift, not just the room around me, but something deep inside. I tried to brush it off at first, to convince myself it had to be some clerical mistake. Hospitals mix things up all the time, right? But even as I told myself that, my fingers refused to let go of the paper. The date, the handwriting, the address, everything lined up too perfectly. It wasn't random, it was deliberate. And the more I looked, the more my chest tightened, as if the air itself had turned heavy. I set the paper down and just stared at it from across the room, as though distance could make it less real. But the name was still there. Rachel Moore, printed neatly beside his. It looked too natural, too practiced, like it had belonged there all along. I felt something break in me, quiet but deep, like glass cracking under pressure. The kind of pain that doesn't make you scream, it just makes you sit there, numb and aware that nothing will ever sound the same again. I tried to think logically, retrace my memories of that week. He'd been sick, he'd said. A fever, maybe? He'd called me, coughing, telling me not to worry. But if he'd been in a hospital, why hadn't he told me? And why was she the one they called? My hands trembled as I closed the folder. It was as if I was holding a weapon, one I hadn't realized existed until it struck me first. And I knew, deep down, this was only the beginning of something I wasn't ready to face. I sat there for what felt like hours, the room shrinking around me, every sound amplified, the hum of the refrigerator, the faint creak of the ceiling fan, the distant bark of a neighbor's dog. My heartbeat filled the silence like a drum I couldn't stop. I wanted to call him right then, to demand an explanation, but something in me said don't. If he could write another woman's name beside his, what else could he lie about? Instead, I reached for my phone and opened our old text messages. They were still there, his "miss you" and "can't wait to come home" texts from that week. Each one now read like a line from a bad script. I scrolled, my throat tightening with every fake word. I realized that trust doesn't shatter with noise. It collapses quietly, one small discovery at a time. That folder wasn't just paper. It was proof that I'd been living inside someone else's story. I placed the document back in the folder, closed it slowly, and slid it beneath a stack of magazines on the coffee table. My hands were shaking, but my mind was clear in a way it hadn't been in years. I didn't know what I would do yet, or how deep the lie ran, only that I would find out. Because once you've seen your name replaced by another, you can't unsee it. You can only decide what you'll do next when he walks through the door. By the time Michael came home that evening, the house looked exactly the same. But I didn't. I'd hidden the document in the drawer beneath the phone charger, the one he never bothered to open. My pulse still hadn't settled, but my face wore a mask I didn't know I owned. He walked in humming, a takeout bag in hand, the smell of sesame and soy filling the air like nothing had changed. "You should have seen the traffic today," he laughed. "Absolute chaos." I forced a smile, one that felt like stretching skin over broken glass. "Glad you made it back safely." I said, my voice steady, polite, rehearsed. He kissed my forehead, the gesture automatic, practiced. Everything okay? He asked. I nodded, but my thoughts were miles away, circling that hospital form. Inside, something whispered, you can lie to my face, but you already told the truth on paper. Dinner tasted like nothing. I watched him talk, his words blending into background noise, his laughter bouncing off the walls that now felt foreign. I realized I didn't want to confront him. Not yet. Confrontation would give him time to twist the story, to make me doubt what I'd seen. No, I wanted facts, evidence, control. So while he talked about work and traffic and trivial things, I smiled, nodded, and quietly began planning the beginning of my own investigation. That night, after he fell asleep, I lay in the dark staring at the ceiling, the faint sound of his breathing beside me. My mind wouldn't rest. Every inhale from him felt like a reminder that I was sharing a bed with a stranger who'd borrowed my husband's voice. I turned quietly, watching the outline of his body under the covers. The man who once felt like home now looked like a closed door. And for the first time, I didn't feel hurt. I felt curious. The next morning, I waited until he left for work before opening my laptop. I logged into the hospital's patient portal, my fingers trembling just enough to make typing harder than it should have been. I searched for his name, his date of birth, and there it was. His records, all listed neatly. The same hospital, the same admission date, and the same emergency contact, Rachel Moore. Seeing it in digital ink made it worse. It wasn't a typo. It was a truth documented, verified, and stored. I printed everything, every form, every note, every timestamp. I read through discharge summaries, doctor signatures, procedure codes. The further I dug, the colder I became. I wasn't reading about a man who made a mistake. I was reading about someone who had built a parallel version of his life. And in that version, I didn't exist. I folded the papers neatly and slipped them into my handbag. If he could build a double life, I could build a plan to dismantle it. The rest of the day moved in slow motion. Every time my phone buzzed with a message from him, a photo of his lunch, a casual, "Miss you," I felt a strange detachment, like I was observing someone else's relationship from a distance. The words didn't sting anymore. They felt rehearsed, recycled. It was almost fascinating to realize how easily a lie could become routine, and how effortlessly he played the part of a devoted husband while living two lives. That night, when he came home, I watched him move around the kitchen, humming again, setting plates on the counter like nothing was wrong. He had no idea that I had already seen behind the curtain. He smiled, kissed my cheek, poured wine into our glasses. I mirrored him, my gestures perfectly timed, not out of love, but precision. I wasn't the heartbroken wife anymore. I was the quiet observer, waiting for the right moment to act. After dinner, I excused myself, saying I needed to organize some bills. Upstairs, I locked the door and opened my bag. The printed document lay there, crisp and damning. I ran my fingers across his name, then hers, side by side. My heart didn't race this time. It steadied. I wasn't lost anymore. The anger that once felt like chaos now had direction. Revenge doesn't start with rage. It starts with clarity. And I had just found mine. Monday morning came too quietly. I dressed carefully, choosing a soft cream blouse and the kind of calm expression people wear when they've already made up their minds. The drive to the hospital felt endless, the kind where traffic lights blur and your reflection in the rearview mirror looks like someone else. I kept replaying his voice in my head, all those casual lies wrapped in affection. But today wasn't about emotion, it was about evidence. When I stepped into the hospital lobby, the air smelled like antiseptic and anxiety. The fluorescent lights hummed overhead, washing everything in sterile white. I walked to the reception desk, the paper clutched tightly in my hand. "Hi," I said, steadying my voice. "I'm verifying a patient file for Michael Sanders. There's an error in his emergency contact. Rachel Moore?" The woman behind the counter clicked through her computer, her brow furrowing as she read. "There's no error, ma'am," she said after a moment. "Rachel Moore has been listed as his emergency contact for years. She even signed off on a minor procedure last year." I felt my breath catch, a soundless reaction, like being punched underwater. "A procedure?" I asked, my voice cracking slightly. "Yes, she said she was his wife," the receptionist replied, glancing up with a hint of sympathy. I thanked her, somehow managing a smile. My hands were cold, but my purpose had never felt warmer. I walked out of the building like someone learning how to breathe again. The air outside felt too thin, too bright. I sat in my car, gripping the steering wheel, staring at the hospital's glass facade. That place, where people went to be healed, had just confirmed how deeply I'd been deceived. I thought I might cry, but no tears came. Shock has its own kind of silence, one that seeps into your bones. I wasn't broken. I was becoming sharp. Before starting the engine, I looked again at the folder on the passenger seat. My name wasn't there. Her name was Rachel Moore, printed, signed, and stamped beside his. I traced the letters with my finger, as if trying to memorize the shape of betrayal. How long had they lived like this? Parallel lines that weren't supposed to meet. And yet, here I was, at the intersection of his lies. It was no longer just about another woman. It was about identity, about erasure. When I finally pulled away from the parking lot, I noticed a bulletin board near the entrance, a photo display for donors. At first, it barely registered, but then I saw it. A smiling photo of him, of us, I thought, until my eyes caught the caption. Mr. and Mrs. Sanders. He was there, arm around her, his grin unguarded and genuine. My hands tightened on the steering wheel until my knuckles turned white. The truth wasn't unfolding anymore. It was screaming. Driving home felt like moving through fog. Every red light stretched forever. Every song on the radio sounded like noise. I wasn't sure whether I wanted to scream or laugh. There was something almost absurd about realizing your husband has a second life, documented neatly in hospital records and donor photos. Betrayal wasn't supposed to look this administrative. It was supposed to be messy, emotional, not written in Times New Roman beside your husband's name. By the time I parked in front of our house, I felt weightless, detached, like someone watching her own story from a distance. I sat in the car for a long time, staring at the front door. The same door he'd kissed me goodbye at every morning. The same one she probably never knew existed. I should have felt rage, but what I felt was purpose. The truth had shape now, and I could finally trace its outline. All I needed was patience. I went inside, placed my keys quietly on the counter, and poured myself a glass of water. My reflection in the window caught my eye, calm, deliberate, unfamiliar. I realized something important. I didn't want to destroy him in a storm of anger. That would have been too easy, too obvious. No. I wanted him to face the weight of what he'd signed, the permanence of ink. Revenge, I decided, would come dressed as silence. That night, I didn't wait for him with anger. I waited with precision. The kitchen light was warm, the table spotless, the hospital record laid out like a quiet confession. I'd placed it dead center beside his wine glass. The clock ticked toward 8, and with each passing second, my heart steadied. When I finally heard the front door open, the sound didn't startle me. His footsteps, his keys, his cheerful tone, all of it sounded rehearsed, like a man unaware he was walking into his own ending. He froze when he saw me sitting there. "What's that?" he asked, nodding toward the paper. I looked up, my voice steady. "A hospital record," I said. "Your name, and another woman listed as your spouse." He blinked, confusion flickering into panic. That's a mistake, Elena. They must have..." "Stop," I cut in. "I went there today. They showed me the signatures. They even had a photo of you two, Mr. and Mrs. Sanders." He sat down slowly, his hands trembling as he reached for the paper but didn't touch it. His throat worked hard before sound came out. "It wasn't serious," he whispered. "She helped me through a rough time. I didn't mean for it to..." "You didn't mean to what?" I asked quietly. "To marry her on paper, To make her your emergency contact? To erase me? The silence that followed wasn't awkward. It was justice waiting for its turn to speak. He leaned back, his face pale, his voice trembling somewhere between guilt and desperation. Please, Elena, it's not what you think. Rachel, she was there when I had the procedure. I didn't want to worry you. I almost laughed, but the sound caught in my throat. So you listed her as your wife instead? That's considerate. He rubbed his temples, muttering something about mistakes, about confusion. I just watched him, silent, letting his own words strangle him. He tried to fill the air with excuses, emotional noise. That's all it was. It didn't mean anything, he said, over and over, like repetition could make it true. I studied him the way you study a painting you once loved, but now see for what it really is. Flawed, faded, fake. You didn't mean it, I repeated softly. Yet you signed it. Twice. His jaw clenched. He didn't realize it yet, but this wasn't a conversation. It was documentation. Then I slid a manila envelope across the table. You're not the only one who knows how to sign things, I said. He opened it slowly, eyes widening as he saw the neatly prepared divorce papers. I had a few free hours today, I added. I used them well. He looked at me like he was seeing a ghost, the kind that doesn't haunt, but judges. For once I didn't look away. Watching him panic felt strangely peaceful. He stared at the papers like they were written in another language. Elena, please, he said, his voice breaking at the edges. We can fix this. I made a mistake, but I still love you. I studied him quietly, my fingers resting on the rim of my glass. Love? I repeated, almost curious. Love isn't a name you give away, Michael. It's a name you protect. He looked down, the weight of my words finally sinking in. I'd waited years for honesty, and all it took to get it was proof he'd given it to someone else. When he reached for my hand, I pulled it back gently. You've already signed your truth, I said. There's nothing left for me to read. His face crumpled, but I didn't feel pity. Only distance. It was strange, almost beautiful, how quickly peace could follow pain once you stopped clinging to what hurt you. For the first time in months, maybe years, I wasn't reacting to him. I was simply done. He tried to speak again, but I stood, gathered the papers, and placed them back in the envelope. I'll let you decide when to sign these, I said, but I wouldn't take too long. Your signatures seem to multiply. As I walked past him, I caught my reflection in the window. Calm, steady, alive. Behind me, he whispered my name like a plea, but I didn't turn around. I'd spent enough time being the woman beside his name. It was time to reclaim my own. The days that followed were strangely peaceful. Silence had become my weapon, and I wielded it with precision. Michael called, texted, apologized, each message more frantic than the last. I didn't block him. I wanted him to hear the echo of his own guilt. I wanted him to feel the absence he'd created. It's funny how quickly someone realizes your worth once they've used your name to lie. He wasn't just sorry. He was unraveling. By Wednesday, the facade began to crumble. His company sent out an internal memo, an investigation into personal conduct violations. I didn't have to say a word. I'd already sent them what they needed. His dual identity, his fraudulent paperwork, his signature inconsistencies. I wasn't seeking revenge for love. I was correcting a record. The same precision he'd used to replace me now worked against him, line by line, form by form. He left voicemail after voicemail, his tone shifting from apologetic to desperate. Elena, please. They're suspending me. This could ruin me. I just need a chance to make it right. I listened to each one once, not out of sentiment but closure. Then I deleted them, one after another, until my phone was silent again. You already made it wrong, I whispered to the empty room, my voice soft but certain. I wasn't angry anymore. I was free. By Friday, the calls stopped, not because he'd given up, but because he finally understood. Losing me wasn't his punishment. Keeping himself was. Word spread quickly through his company's glass halls, where reputation was currency and scandal was a death sentence. The same man who once prided himself on transparency now had his lies printed in internal reports. Watching it unfold from a distance felt almost therapeutic. I didn't need to humiliate him. The truth was doing it for me. I spent that weekend clearing drawers, deleting photos, erasing the small pieces of our life that no longer fit. There was a rhythm to it: fold, discard, breathe. Each action felt like reclaiming territory. I wasn't mourning, I was cleaning. The smell of lemon cleaner filled the room again, just like the day I'd found the file. But this time the air didn't feel heavy. It felt earned. Every stain, every paper, every name was mine to sort through, mine to keep or destroy. On Sunday, I drove past his office building. It stood tall and sleek, its mirrored windows reflecting a city that no longer belonged to either of us. I parked across the street and watched for a moment. Somewhere inside, he was probably packing up his things, emails archived, badge deactivated. I thought about how fitting it was. He'd tried to rewrite his life with someone else's name beside his, and in the end, it was his own signature that undid him. That night, I poured myself a glass of wine and sat by the window, watching the city lights flicker like faint confessions. For months, I'd lived in the shadow of his deception, but now, the silence around me felt sacred. Revenge hadn't brought chaos, it brought clarity. I realized it wasn't about punishing him anymore. It was about restoring my own name, my own presence in a story that had tried to erase me. I opened the drawer and took out the last piece of paper that bore both our names. The divorce decree, freshly signed, his final admission, my quiet victory. I ran my fingers over the embossed seal, not to savor the win, but to remind myself how easily something official can be rewritten. Then I folded it, placed it in a folder marked closed, and smiled at the word. For the first time, it truly meant something. Before bed, I looked around my home, the same walls, the same furniture, but everything felt different, lighter. The weight of deceit had been replaced by something simple: peace. He had destroyed his own life chasing the illusion of another. I didn't need to ruin him. I only needed to remove myself from the story. Some endings don't need fire or fury, just a signature and the courage to walk away. 6 months later, I walked through the same hospital doors, but this time, my steps felt lighter. The scent of disinfectant, the echo of distant beeping monitors, the hum of fluorescent lights, all once reminders of betrayal, now felt like background noise in someone else's story. I wasn't there to uncover lies anymore. I was there to help. Volunteering as a counselor for patients navigating paperwork, I found purpose in the very thing that once shattered me: forms, signatures, names. One afternoon, as I helped an elderly woman fill out her contact information, she smiled and said, "You seem like someone who's been through a lot." I returned her smile, soft but sure. "Enough to know that names matter," I told her, "especially the ones beside yours." Her eyes glistened, and for a fleeting moment, I saw myself in her, the version of me that had once believed she was someone else's shadow. But that woman no longer existed. I'd written her out of my life. As I left the hospital, my phone buzzed, an unknown number flashing across the screen. A message appeared: "I think about you every day." I deleted it without hesitation. The sky outside was pale gold, the kind of light that makes everything look new. I walked toward my car, keys in hand, a quiet smile tugging at my lips. He wrote her name beside his once, I thought. Now, mine stands alone, exactly where it belongs.